Hello and welcome to the Notes and Accords stream. I am back. We had a dry run. We'll call it a dry run where it had some technical issues, but I am back in business. We are going to be discussing the leather note or a leather accord in fragrance. We're going to start off with discussing the preponderance of materials that are available to the perfumer, both natural and synthetic. So we'll get things started here. At the original run of the stream before technical difficulties, I'd asked folks if they could give examples of materials that they would imagine would be included in a perfumer's interpretation of leather. And a lot of you had some great ideas, great suggestions, many of which are in fact used by perfumers. We can just pick up where we left off with that, and we'll get started. I think what we want to do first, though, is discuss the natural materials that are involved in making a leather accord. So unfortunately, for those who saw the pre-technical difficulty run, we're going to be repeating some things here, so just bear with us. But for those who are tuning into the archive for the first time, this will be the first time that you'll be hearing all of this. So for the sake of those who will be tuning in later, I'm going to be discussing much of what was initially discussed. So without further ado, we'll get things started with this. I'm going to just check the comments very quickly here. We have Paroli back again. We have PS, good to see you. Crystal Clear, that's excellent. Junkie Scent, wonderful, good to see you too, my friend. Kasha. So Kasha is in Chinese cinnamon, the cinnamon bark. Perhaps it would make for a good modifier to lift a leather accord. That wouldn't be out of the question at all. Some people mistakenly called cassis or blackcurrant bud Kasha. So if you're referring to blackcurrant, I see why not. In fact, one of the great new releases of this year from perfumer Christopher Sheldrake in collaboration with Roberto Greco, Parfum Objet d'Art, is Roque. And Roque actually, I believe, has a cassis top note, which is beautiful. So that's an example of where you have this leather scent. Well, it's more than that. It's a kaleidoscope. We'll talk more about it later, but that's an example of where you're going to have the cassis blackcurrant bud with the leather accord. So we'll get started. So what I wanted to discuss first is birch tar. So this is birch tar. This is actually from the Betula alba tree, the birch tree. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this particular material. So with birch tar, this is actually extracted through a distillation of the tar, the actual exudate from the tree. Birch tar essential oil today needs to be rectified. And rectification means it's a removal of so-called impurities or ingredients that are either undesirable or they're dangerous. So it was determined that with unrectified birch tar oil, there are certain constituents that are considered to be potentially carcinogenic. This is extremely strong material. It's a little smoky, a little sweet. It kind of reminds me of hickory smoke. Using an aromatic wood in a fire, it could be barbecue-like, even sort of minty-like. It has these interesting top notes to it. It is extremely tenacious. So it is recommended that the perfumer only use 0.001% of this in building a leather accord. Specifically, Russian leather accords will contain a birch tar or some sort of facsimile thereof to create that aspect. The certain components in this are cresol, creosol. Now, what's interesting is both birch tar and narcissus, the narcissus material, you know, the aromatic material of the narcissus flower also contains cresols. So it wouldn't be out of the question to find that there are leathers that also have the note of jonquil or narcissus. Creosol, think of things like creosote, the creosote bush. That's another constituent that's in birch tar. Guaiacol. So we have birch tar here, and I think I'm going to break the rules a little bit because we have the isolated guaiacol here. And this stuff, just the isolation of guaiacol, it smells like burning leaves and then some. It's extremely powerful. It's really phenolic, smoky, spicy, medicinal, vanillic. It also has a savory, meaty quality. So if you think of like really smoky fragrances, there's going to be a high content of guaiacol, whether it's from a natural material or just in isolation. Now, I mentioned that word phenolic. Is there anybody out there who can tell me what it means for a scented material to be phenolic? And while we do that, we're just going to check in with some of the folks here. Pat Lester, great to see you. Fernando, great to see you again. Supply and demand, scent of the day, gentle fluidity, gold MFK, a delightful wear, very nice. Antonio Hobson, I'm doing very well, thank you. Your scent of the day is a marvelous classic, YSL Opium, great. Hello there, Channel Z. Is this part 2 from intermission? No, this is actually going to be the real part 1. There may be a brief intermission with this official stream, but for folks who aren't aware, we did have an initial run and it involved some technical difficulties. My old Bessie laptop was having some RAM issues that I had to resolve, and unfortunately I had to discontinue. Okay, and Cindy M says I have Russian leather and it does contain birch tar. Yes, it could contain the actual birch tar, or it could use the magic of a perfumer to create an accord which resembles birch tar, which is also possible. Jean-Claude Scent had just sprayed Cabochard. Cabochard will be getting to get Okay, I think that folks can hear me now. If anybody cannot hear me, just let me know if my mic is okay. I'm just having a comedy of errors during this stream, but hopefully everything is okay as far as the audio. But I have Cabochard in. This is a much rarer version. This is actually the original, or well, not the original, but it is the Eau de Parfum before it was reissued, relaunched. And look at that lovely texture on the bottle. It echoes that sort of very scribbly pattern that you find on some of the gray bottles, and it's actually molded into the glass. It's a gorgeous bottle. Thank you, folks, for just letting me know that the audio is just fine. That's Cabochard. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. But back to the materials. We were just talking about birch tar. We were talking about guaiacol, which is a component in birch tar. So we have the actual birch tar here. This is some of my birch tar, very powerful stuff. And then the guaiacol, which is just, this is an isolate of that component that is in birch tar. Now next, the next material, which is often associated with the leather accord, is cade wood. And cade is a type of juniper. It is Juniperus oxycedrus. Cade wood is different in it's equally as smoky, but it is different. It has different constituents in it that lend a very different quality to cade. So with cade, it's very heavy. It's considered maybe more masculine in isolation. Of course, it could be used in, you know, in any kind of unisex composition. Very smoky on its own, and it can be overwhelming. It's only used in traces. And when I mean traces, I mean that the perfumer in a formula will use probably no more than 0.001%. This heavy diluted. Sniffing this pure out of this bottle, it smells like charred wood. It smells like, you know, you're walking by a house that has been completely burnt down. Maybe the firemen didn't get to that, or firewoman didn't get to that house right away, and it is extremely phenolic and extremely smoky. Very powerful stuff. See, not to get into sort of like an editorial tangent, but I feel like with some of the newer smoky, very smoky, pyrogenous fragrances, they overdose these, and it can be a bit oppressive. I think of Wasikar as an example. The name of the house escapes me, but it's the house that has the gold flecks, the garish gold flecks floating in the bottle. And that one, I think, is a bit of an overload of birch tar because it smells verging on bacony. It's very meaty smelling. To kind of give you a description of guaiacol, which is also in birch, in the birch tar essential oil. So guaiacol in itself, it's recommended it can be used up to 0.5%, but the idea of that seems to be wild to me. I think that some indie perfumers have taken note of that recommended maximum and have used it to the maximum. It's phenolic, it's smoky, it's spicy, it's medicinal, vanillic, savory, meaty. There's a bit of a woody nuance. It's a very valuable material for smoky scents. It adds a lovely depth to a lot of different blends. It has to be used with care, or it can turn your perfume into bacon. It's a very powerful material, even at 1% in propylene glycol or ethanol. It oxidizes very readily and needs to be stored well. But a cool, dark place usually suffices. It's just very powerful, almost medicinal. Like I said, it kind of reminds me, if I smell it for a brief moment, it reminds me of burning leaves, but it is extremely strong. It is known to be used even in florals like ylang ylang, lilac, narcissus. There's the narcissus again, something chrysolic, lily, carnation. And then in somewhat higher proportions, it can be used in spice complexes, spice accords. But guaiacol would be present in leather accords either through its appearance in birch tar or maybe even perhaps on its own. Now, the next one, since we are talking all about perfume, natural perfume materials, I want to see if somebody who is tuned in will know what the next natural perfume material is that I'm about to discuss. And while we do that, we're just going to get back to the folks here. We have, P.S. Hiram Green's hide was all barbecue on my skin. No bueno. No, that wouldn't be my idea of a good time. Welcome, Algebraist. Great to have you here. And you have some lovely narcissus in your avatar. Very nice. I by Brian. By cassia, I don't mean cassis or blackcurrant. I mean the tree plant family cassia, which is technically the legume family. Yes. Well, cassia is a type. It's a Chinese cinnamon, and it can be part of a leather accord as well. It was one of those that I consider. I didn't want to take out every single perfume material that I have that could be used in a leather formula, but I don't see that as being out of the question. Supply and demand, Quid de Chine is a fave leather of mine. Cindy M, have you ever tried Perfumer's Apprentice oils? Yes, in fact, I do have many of them. I have many from Perfumer's Apprentice, Perfumer Supply House, Creating Perfume, and a number of others. So does anybody know? 18 people who are tuned in right now. What will be, we already talked about birch tar. We already talked about cade oil. What is the next natural material that you think I'm going to pull out? Let's see if somebody can guess correctly. And while I do that, I might just choose another selection, another backdrop here for us to have some music to play. And we'll just get that started here. All right, so I'm waiting 5 seconds. We have 20 people tuned in. Just a reminder to hit the like button. We had 16 likes in the first run. I want to try to get it back up to about 16 likes. Algebraist, very close. That's the other one. So you can only think there's only so many. What would be the other one? But while you mentioned Castorian, rosewood, good idea. Rosewood is not necessarily in the immediate circle of leather materials. Yes, I by Brian. Congratulations, Styrax. Since you got that right, if you send me a super chat or buy me a coffee for $5, you can get yourself a free sample pack. So if you want to do that, just one coffee or a super chat will send you a sample pack. Congratulations. Yes, we're gonna get to Castorian in just a second. But what we do have here is liquid amber. I always have a tough time with it. Styracyclua. Liquid amber, Styracyclua, liquid amber, otherwise known as Styrax or Storax. Let's talk a little bit about this. I recently did a post on the Styrax tree, which we know here in North America and perhaps in Europe as well as the sweet gum tree, because in cutting the boughs, limbs, branches, the trunk, cutting into cambium of the tree, it does exude this resin, and it is called Styrax. So we'll talk about this one. Very unusual on its own. Now, can you think of something that? What is something else that you can think of? What do you think of when you hear Styrax? Think of something else in nature or made synthetically. Let's see if somebody can guess that. While we do that, this is liquid amber Styracyclua. That's sweet, spicy, is very unusual. Somewhat amber-like. Very much a fixative quality. That means it's going to fix other elements, other components that are in a composition so that they dry down at the base. Very seldom is it the centerpiece of a fragrance, but that doesn't stop perfumers from having some creative license in doing so. There is a cinnamic quality to it as well. There's a couple of different components. Cinnamate, 3-phenylpropyl cinnamate. It's recommended to be used 0.6%. There is almost this styrene quality. Think about that, styrene. So there's almost this strange vinyl-y sort of plasticky kind of quality that it can impart as well. And Algebraster has a great comment to contribute. Styrax is used beautifully in Times Square by Mask with the osmanthus, and it gives it a leathery effect. but more so here to evoke a dirtiness as is expected for a city like New York City. And I do think that pushing the limits of Styrax would enable a perfumer to evoke something like that. But the Styrax tree is a beautiful tree as well. In a recent post that I did on Instagram, I mentioned that it's often grown as an ornamental that lines streets and is in parks. Have these beautiful leaves during autumn that turn different colors, yellow and red and orange. They also have those little seed pods with the spikes on them that kids will play with. They're a little bit painful if you accidentally step on them. While you might think this is a very exotic material, the tree that provides us with this is actually quite common. Just a matter of whether or not the trees are grown specifically to distill this particular resinous oil. The origin of this one is Honduras. They're from the wild Styrax trees of Honduras, and I purchased this one from a wonderful naturals provider, Eden Botanicals. So that is the next one. We'll move on to Castorium. And yes, Castorium is another natural material that is in the perfumer's palette. So when we have with Castorium, it comes from the castor pod of a beaver. And unfortunately, yes, the beaver does need to be killed in order to acquire the castor pod. But it is a byproduct that is in abundance because beavers often need to be killed anyways. They often are killed. So while we're killing them, why waste, out of dignity and respect for these animals, why waste what they have to give us? So that's the way that we can get our castor pods. So I don't really want to argue with vegans and those who are animal activists who say that we shouldn't do it, etc. That's not what this forum is for. I do respect if that's your belief and you would prefer to use synthetic replacers, which also can be somewhat suitable and approximate Castorium, but the natural material still is used, but there are replacers as well. So can anybody think of some certain fragrances where, a leather fragrance where Castorium is very forward? So we have Fernando saying labdanum. Yes, labdanum is another example of it. In fact, I have one type of labdanum material that we'll go over in just a moment. Osmanthus. Osmanthus is a great adjacent accord to a leather fragrance. So these materials are specifically traditionally used for a leather accord. The adjacency meaning that there can be other notes that surround the leather. There can be maybe something that the perfumer decides out of modifying and lifting and adjusting and changing and shading using certain materials, but they're not the core materials that are used. That being said, osmanthus as a raw material almost does have a leathery quality to it. And that's why we do often find that osmanthus may be a note that is juxtaposed with leather. So it is a good suggestion. Violet, excellent suggestion as well, because there are certain perfume materials that work really well with violet accord. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Lilac, sure. I mean, we could have a perfume that has a lilac and a leather note, and it could be a leather-focused fragrance that has a lilac note. But lilac, as far as a raw material, doesn't exist. So we don't have a natural material for lilac, and lilac has a whole set of materials of its own that are used to put together that particular note or accord. Yes, well, the cinnamon, there is the cinnamic qualities that are in Styrax. There are also components that are in Styrax that are somewhat vanillic. It's not terribly vanillic, though. It is sort of, when you're looking at the sort of the spectrum of resins, it's there. Benzoin is related to the sweet gum, the Styrax tree. So you're going to have a little bit of overlap there, but Styrax isn't really necessarily known too much for being vanillic as it is for being spicy and leathery and kind of epoxy-like, very unusual kind of smell, like ambery. So the ambery, it might, a little bit of the vanillic, but I would say closer to benzoin and labdanum. Vetiver. Once again, vetiver is, so when we're talking about the materials, we're talking about specifically putting together leather. So vetiver would be like a whole other notes and accord series of its own, but vetiver and leather juxtaposed, often found in perfume. benzoin, yeah. Classic, it's wonderful algebraic. That's an excellent example of a classic Castorian. Do we find real Castorium used today? That could be up for debate. I wouldn't put any bets on it, but I'm sure, you know, they use a very good Castorium replacer. So I was talking about labdanums, and there is a particular one here, and this is this particular material that is produced by Cinerome. This is called amberrome. So we're going to talk about this particular labdanum extraction called amberrome, which has been promoted for use in leather accords. It's very powerful, warm and leathery, peppery and tarry, almost like coffee notes, tobacco, animalic. Some aspects of it are like ambergris. It's very challenging to work with. It's very powerful. It's very punchy. And it has aspects of castoreum and labdanum and vanilla notes, but there's no sweetness at all. It's a bit dirty and animalic, almost fecal, especially if you're going to use it more than in a small amount. It could be used in ouds. It could be used in place of castoreum or paired with castoreum. And I am finding it more frequently used and even listed in the notes pyramid in a number of leather fragrances, including the magnificent Rauch, which was released by Roberto Greco just recently, composed by Christopher Sheldrake. And it actually lists in the note pyramid this actual material, Amberrome Absolute from Cinerome. And Algebraea says, on the topic of violet, ionones are often used to soften a leather note, and they are included in the mousse de Sach space. I was actually going to mention a little bit of mousse de Sach, its usage in early, mid-century perfumery and its appearance, and where we see the ionones and the leather come together when we start talking about the sampling of fragrances that I have by my side. Sweet milk, wormwood. A great pairing for leather, not a leather material, but a great pairing for leather, a great modifier, a great way to aromatize it. So I think that would be, that's not a bad choice at all to imagine wormwood. Canitza 10, if I remember, also includes castoreum, says Fernando Soto. Yes, a castoreum note or a castoreum reimagining. More herbal green. It is more herbal green. It wouldn't necessarily, Algebrace is right, it is more of a material that you could perhaps create a perfume with a number of different accords that include a leather accord and an aromatic green accord. But it isn't in and of itself a leather material. We're going to keep going here. But that was a great suggestion, though, and it's actually one of my favorite notes in perfume, believe it or not. Next, for raw materials here, we're still on the natural materials. What we have here is a libinol. A libinol is produced by Roberte or Robertet. A libinol is actually from, as you can imagine, a libinum. So let's get into a libinol a little bit. It's soft, it's balsamic, it's incensey, it's very effervescent. And it's a constituent. It's actually a constituent of frankincense. So this is sort of an isolation of this constituent. It isolates it to showcase its own qualities. And there is one particular fragrance that I can mention that uses, I'm fairly certain uses a libinol. I could be wrong, but I feel like there's a fair quantity of a libinum in it. And we'll reach for that. And that's right here. This is a Salvatore Ferragamo Testa di Moro. This is an incense leather. Beautiful stuff. And I feel like a libinol or just a libinum resin is used in this. It's a beautiful interpretation of a soft, plushy leather. And yeah, that's an example of where I think we would find in a libinum or frankincense pairing with leather. And this is a usage of a libinol. This is an example of something where I think it can impart more like top notes in a leather. And we have 22 people who are tuned in. Thank you for tuning into the Notes and Accords session. We are focusing on leather. And let's see if I have gone through all of my naturals. I believe that I have. So those are the naturals that we'll discuss. There are still more, but I didn't, if we were going to discuss all of them, we would be here for a very long time. So I want to keep things succinct. We're going to next move on to the synthetics. How's that sound? All right, so the first synthetic we are going to discuss is perhaps one of the most famous ones for creating a leather accord. And can anybody who is in the chat at this moment guess what is that material? I have it sitting here. I have a vial in my hand. Show the label. Does anybody know what this most famous synthetic? Oh, winner, winner, chicken dinner. Jean-Claude, IBQ, isobutylquinoline. Isobutylquinoline or quinoline. And this is one of the types of quinolines that can be used in perfume, but this is the most well-known one. Now, for the 19 people who are tuned in, can you tell me what perfumer revolutionized the use of isobutylquinoline? Hey, good to see you. We'll talk about that one in a little bit. Hey. So who can tell me what perfumer revolutionized? So there is one, so this doesn't include Kanitsa 10. Kanitsa 10 does have it. But what perfumer really pushed the envelope of IBQ? We'll give a little time for an answer there, but in the meantime, we're going to start talking about isobutylquinoline. So it's something that over time, if you get very familiar with identifying things in a perfume, you'll know that it's there. It's intense, it's earthy, it's fruity, almost nutty, sharp, sometimes ashy. Its character resembles certain facets of like vetiver, oak moss, but there's also sort of an ambery and woody, tobacco-like quality, and of course, it feels leathery. Perfumer, what perfumer? Junkie Sen, yes, je m'enseignais, oui. Congratulations, Ms. Germaine Sayet. So while we have, we do see the usage of isobutylquinoline prior to the inception of this particular creation by Germaine Sayet. Germaine Sayet pushed it far in, and I wore some of it earlier. I still have it. Here it is. This is Bandi from Robert Piguet. And Bandi has the highest percentage of isobutylquinoline than anyone can really imagine in a perfume. It's usually recommended at 2%, no more than 2%. And I don't have the exact figure. Maybe my fellow perfume nerds know the exact percentage of isobutylquinoline that Sayet used in Bandi. But we're going to talk a little bit about some of the perfumes that contain Bandi, might as well say that contain IBQ. A lot of the progenitors, a lot of the descendants, rather. Algebraist has a really good comment that just showed up here. It should be noted that IBQ as it is today is not leather because the impurity responsible for the leather character, butylquinoline secondary, is now not in IBQ as sold by the big firms. Thank you for that contribution. And I do think that there needs to be a little bit of magic on the part of perfumers using other materials to reintroduce that aspect, which brings me to another quinoline that is available to the perfumer's palette. And this one is 6-methyl quinoline. 6-methyl quinoline. Geez Louise. It's not really one that's meant to be smelled right out of the vial. So this is another quinoline that is used in perfume and in building leathery accords. This actually is what I had in mind when Algebraeus mentioned that isobutylquinoline alone may not be enough. It can be a combination of isobutylquinoline and 6-methylquinoline, which is more leathery. It's animalic. It's almost fecal, and it has these facets of like civet and castorian. And when it's diluted, it is tobacco-y. So you have the combination of the two, which I've experimented with and is quite compelling as far as creating that effect. So this is the other quinoline I have, which is 6-methyl quinoline. Okay. All right. So somebody mentioned the other raw material that has come into vogue, especially in the 21st century, and that was saffroline. And here's saffroline. And there's the other one, which is this is suederol. This is from Creating Perfume, and this is from Perfumer's Apprentice. So when you hear saffroline, you do think of saffron, and that's because saffronol, which I do have here as well, a little bit of the saffronol, the component that is found in saffron. Saffronol is in saffroline, and we'll chat a little bit about saffronol here. So saffronol, or saffroline rather, saffroline, it's warm, it's spicy, it's very powerful. It can overpower a blend if not handled carefully. Leathery, tobacco-like. It is reminiscent of natural saffron, but it is enriched by these rose ketone-like floral aspects. Very versatile in low doses. You can add a little bit of a kick, a little bit of a spice into a fragrance, but in higher doses, it does give you that distinct leather note. And it blends well with its pal, suederol. And it can be used effectively, saffroline, in, with traces of birch tar and leather compositions. It's a bit softer than the suederol, but it's more skin and less leather-like, depending upon how you use it. Saffronol, not saffronol, but suederol, is produced by IFF, International Flavors and Fragrances, and this is pretty much, as you guess from the name, it's like new suede. It's very persistent. It gives you this distinct leather note from the opening through the base of the fragrance, and it blends well with other leathery notes. Now, I did mention this in the first run of the stream before we had technical difficulties. Let's see if somebody can answer yet again. What perfume, what well-known leather fragrance contains saffroline and suederol with a dose of raspberry ketone? What perfume on the market, which is quite popular, contains saffroline and suederol? Oh, there we go. Thank you, Philippe. Thank you for your answer, Tuscan Leather. And that has become a very popular trope in a lot of modern leather fragrances. Algebraist mentions that Givaudan has pyrrolone, which is less earthy, butyl quinoline secondary, also more tobacco-like, and used up to 20%, 22%. Thank you very much for that. And we have supply and demand also chiming with TL. And we have Channel Z with TF. Well, Philippe does recall that I that I did discuss this during my first run of the stream before technical difficulties, but I still want to give him credit because I think he was the one who answered it correctly the first time around. All right. So those are the some of the synthetic materials, and then there's also bases. There are bases that are available to perfumers. As far as whether or not these bases are reliable, because they can go in and out of production, they can change just like availability of any other materials can change. So it's generally discouraged unless you have some confidence that whoever produces these bases will be continuing to produce them for a long time. And one of them is Queer HF base. This is produced by Cinerome. And this is a specialty leather accord, a leather base rather. It has a fresh bergamot top to it. There, it's oracey, it's violety as well. So there you go. We have the ionones and the irones coming in. There's a spicy heart, and it's rounded off by some woods and musks. And I am quite fond of this particular base. It's produced by Cinerome. That's Queer HF. This is quite an interesting one because this is used in so many functional and industrial settings, including furniture, cars, to give that new car smell. For leather, it makes things smell. It makes leather smell leathery than the leather is itself. It's called leather specialty base. This is produced by a chemical manufacturer, LWS. It's also known as Leather 376A, and it's a blend of synthetic aroma chemicals with odors of leather and suede. And this is the smell of a car interior. It just matches it exactly. And then we have Leather MD. This little sample of it. You can see that it has this very golden kind of maple syrupy kind of color to it. Let me make sure that so you can see the color there. So this is another base that is available to the perfumer. It's produced by Firmenich. This is sort of like a good replacer for birch tar, smoky, leathery, pyrogenous notes. And it is obtained through what is called a molecular distillation of natural ingredients. So it contains about 11% natural ingredients that have been molecularly distilled. So that means a distillation on the molecular level so that they can get a particular cross-section, sort of like a particular band of components in that, or scented components in that natural material to just capture that. There's a few others that are on the, a number of others, actually several in the market. Like, for example, Clearwood is a molecular distillation of patchouli, which takes very specific aspects of that patchouli and molecularly distill them into a new material. Algebrae says the Tuscan Leather was my first perfume ever at 18 before I knew anything. Yeah, it's a good entry level. It's a good place to start. I never really grew too fond of that very modern kind of leather. I'm much more Spanish leather, Russian leather, IBQ kind of leather kind of guy, or Styraxy Castorian leather kind of guy than that very clean new leather car interior kind of smell. Philippe Alex, do you know how close would a rubber accord be to a leather accord? So that would probably involve some similar materials and some very different materials. I think that would have to be pulled in a different direction. I can imagine maybe Styrax would actually have a role in that, though, because Styrax can feel like a little bit rubbery. But that's a good question. That'd be a good one to explore. And what kind of leather is used in Gucci Guilty Absolute? Good question. I have Gucci Guilty Absolute right here. Here's my bottle of it. I think there are quinolines in this. I think that there is guaiacol, definitely. We were talking about guaiacol earlier. It is a constituent that is in birch tar. So even if birch tar isn't used, guaiacol could be used with a few other materials. There could be leather MD. Leather MD could have had a role in this as well. If algebraist, who is quite knowledgeable on materials as well, could guess maybe what was used in Gucci Guilty Absolute, just chime in. I always value your input. And Bulgari Black, kind of like powdered latex gloves. Yeah, I have Bulgari Black here. This is like vanilla scented rubber erasers to me. No, it's not, I never really got car rubber. To me, it does remind me of scented erasers because erasers are often rubber, but vanilla scented, and I kind of like that. 23 people who are currently tuned in. I just want to let folks know that we do have a buy me a coffee. Each coffee is $5. We do have also something that is currently going via promotion, and I'm just bringing that up here. We have an offer of buy me a coffee. 6 cups of coffee equal a sample pack. So you will receive a sample pack from my overflowing, enormous surplus of samples. So for 6 cups, you can get a sample pack. 12 cups will get you a 4 full bottle grab bag. So out of the many doubles and extra perfumes that while I do regard fondly, I can't have all these. I have far too large of a collection. So for 12 cups, you get 4 full bottle grab bag plus a sample pack. Mind you, this is only US at this time. I apologize to those who are out of the US. So just follow the link in the pinned comment. And Duncan says 12K likes. Good job. 12K likes. 12K likes where? I don't think I have 12K of anything anywhere. I'm almost at 5,000 on Instagram and about 1,400 almost and subscribers. I don't know where the 12K likes are coming from. Please let me know because I'm entirely unaware. Terry Smile says he loves Gucci Guilty Absolute, Algebraist, and we already mentioned that. And Prada Luna Rossa Black is pretty similar to Bulgari Black, says Duncan. Midnight Paris, I think, is very similar as well. I found that to be a bit too reductive to really, say anything, ingratiating about it. I feel I might have a dud with my GGA. The juice in the bottle is so much lighter than the one I see online. Oh, well, that's unfortunate. I wasn't aware that. I kind of figured that was a one and done, meaning that it was produced in pretty much one batch for production and wasn't formulated and then discontinued. Unless maybe there was a dud batch. I don't know. And Duncan says he does prefer the hockey puck. Okay. And Paroli says, Queer Andalou is my scent of the night. We have 24 people who are tuned in. So we have gone through all of the materials in about the first hour of this stream. And I've shared a few examples of leathers here. We'll just go through some of those. We have Jean-Claude Scent, who has just left a comment. I love leather notes in Jolie Madame, which I was about to reach for Jolie Madame because of her mentioning Bandi earlier. Jolie Madame is in the same wheelhouse, except this is the perfect example, and this is why I love that you mentioned Violet, because this is the marriage between the inones and the leather. And you mentioned that you gave up wearing Bandi after some trying, and immediately after one spray of Le Sillage Blanc on the blotter, I had to evacuate the other room. Le Sillage Blanc is a really powerful IBQ. It's not my favorite from Dusita. I felt like, with all due respect, she didn't really add any new concept to the usage of IBQ. It just felt kind of like a sort of a tribute to it, which I just find really just not necessary. Just so many. I have so many as it is, and I really do appreciate IBQ leathers, but I just felt like, oh, again, another one, another niche one, another expensive niche one. Okay, why not? Just wasn't excited about it. Jolie Madame. Yes, so the IBQ is toned down. It is sort of it's there, but nowhere in the same respect as Bandi. Um, yeah, the Narcissus chrysalic facet. Yeah, I was mentioning earlier. I think it was during the stream that that Narcissus is often a really good pairing with leather because of the cresols that you find in in birch tar, the smoky materials, and also in Narcissus. Narcissus also has cresols in it. And Monsieur Cotier is a great leather, probably a favorite, but it doesn't like being bottled. It's almost like it's carbonated. Monsieur Cotier, Cotier. I have that bottle back here. Hold on just one second. Monsieur Cotier, Jean Cotier, most famously known for Coriandre from the 70s. This was also from the 70s. It is quite a lovely leather, and I do pick up Castorian. I think that there's some, oh my God, I think there's some real Castorian. Let's fetishize the real Castorian, the real beaver butt. Let's talk about that beaver butt, right? There's beaver butt in this, but it's so aromatic as well. It's so smooth. It's so lovely. I feel like whoever composed this was either it was Guy Robert or he was inspired by Guy Robert, because it just has that Guy Robert flair to it. It just feels so smooth, so aromatic, so elegant. I love the elegance in his approach to perfume. So if you were not familiar with Guy Robert, he also composed Hermès Equipage, Monsieur Rochat, the original Gucci #1, a lovely rose chypre in the 70s, and also the Gucci for Men, the original one from the 70s. I wonder if he did compose this, but it does remind me of a Guy Robert. It's lovely stuff. And look at this. I love the chevron shape of this bottle. Check that out. That's something you just don't see nowadays, these kind of molds for bottles. 12 by Jean Cotier. Couturier. I keep saying Couturier. 12 or Douce from Couturier is also quite nice. It's a very geranium forward muscly fougere from the early 80s. And the Udo Pantograph says, I love how Violet and Leather sits in Violette Volinka by Hermes. That's another example of the usage of Suederol. Suederol is in spades in Violette Volinka. Supply and demand. The only active leather I have is room 1015 Cherry Punk. Cherry and Leather works in Florida for me. Yes. Hi, Jonathan. Oh, I didn't see that. I'm just catching up. Yes, that's another great example from Jean Couturier. And Duncan mentions that a New Year's sentimental 100 ml in a splash bottle, and I completely wrecked the 30 ml atomizers I tried to use. It came out super hard in the straight. Oh, wow. Yikes. Yeah, those pressurized sprayers can be pretty unfortunate. I've had a couple of those get locked into the spray mode and completely, it be emptied of its contents within a minute. And like, there's nothing you can do about it. It's awful. Um, let's look at some other leathers. If you're just tuning in, during the first hour, we went over all of the raw materials, and now we're just discussing many of the perfumes that contain the different raw materials, the naturals and the synthetics. A lot of these leather forward fragrances. Discuss Je m'enseignais, Bandi, Jolie Madame. But can someone out there, not yet, we're about to get there. The good segue, because you might be able to answer this quickly. Who was thought to be under the tutelage of Germain Seye, who continued to carry the torch of IBQ into the 60s and 70s and beyond, and did a number of magnificent compositions for different houses. Who can name that perfumer? Let's see who can name that perfumer while I choose another selection from the music. We'll see who can think of that perfumer. Who can think of the yeah, there you go. Yeah, bien marchand. Bien marchand did some amazing compositions in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So we're going to talk a little bit about something else that he contributed. I'm just going to pretend I didn't see that. So we're going to talk about them, and yes, of course. Okay, there it is. This is Arthur and water in 1960. And this picks up where Bandi left off, but floralizes it even more, and adds some certain flourishes that may not have been available at the time. It had some sorry about the sound issues. It's been a wreck this evening. Had some flourishes that were in vogue in the 60s. So, yeah, I'm very sorry about that. It's I think I'm back in business here. Are we sounding okay now? I'm having very touchy wires as well. It's just been a folly of sorts. Yeah, I think I might have to graduate into that, a wireless headset or something to that effect. We're working on it. In 2024, there's going to be an upgrade. It's about time. So, Duncan, are you suggesting a blind buying Azure? Um, I don't think that you would be disappointed in Azure, but I would be patient about not spending an egregious amount of money on the vintage or the version that is in this lovely sprocket style bottle. Um, Honestly, the newer version of Azure is no slouch. It's quite lovely. It isn't as high throttle as this, but it is beautiful. So for those out there who don't really want to spend the kind of money that is going for this, you can get a pretty good idea of what the magic of Azure is from the more recent version of it. I'm pretty confident about saying that. I have the newer bottle as well. I have this because I was fortunate enough to find it for $90, which to me is still crazy because I missed out when it was selling for like 25. But it seems to be going now for 250, 300 ridiculous amounts of money. I'm not going to concern you too much about like, exactly what kind you need to get. As long as you're getting, if you find a bottle like this, and you can afford it and you're not spending your savings, then I recommend it. Otherwise, try out the newer version of Azure. It's beautiful. I really don't think that it's bad at all. It's certainly, it's better than the Sillage Blanc. I will say that it's better than Ducide, and a lot cheaper too, and more substantive. If you're concerned about performance, it performs better. Um, the newer version of Azure, as opposed to Ducide's Le Sillage Blanc. And Paroli mentions Amazon sometimes has good deals on headphones during Black Friday. Yeah, I'm gonna pay attention to some of those Black Friday deals. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that Estee Lauder, surprisingly enough, is good at maintaining the integrity of some of these classics. Although I do recall Although I do recall Algebraeus mentioning that the newest version of Youth Do left a little bit to be desired. If Algebraeus is still here, if you can chime in on that. Um, yeah, I mean, it's the way to go for sure if you can afford it. If you can afford it, if you're willing to spend the kind of money that it's going for now, go for it. But it's not like you're going to be disappointed if you have the newer version of it. And bear in mind that there's also, I mean, there's a number of fragrances that kind of fall into this wheelhouse that maybe haven't had quite the same amount of hype as well. And that's what I was going to sort of segue into, because this was the age of the IBQ leather Chypre, and there were a lot that came out during the time. And Algebraeus says, I tried Youth Dew recently and it had drastically changed, yet at the beginning of the year, it was fine. So it must be just the newest formulation of it, which is unfortunate. So I'm talking about others that fall into the same ilk. So we have Bernard Chance Azure, but we also have, um, well, let's think about another one that came out around the same time, which is gorgeous as well. And this is a pretty brutal, bitch mode kind of IBQ leather floral Chypre, and it's Miss Balmain. Miss Balmain from Pierre Balmain. I say if you want to get something that's just as stunning as Angeret, but you don't necessarily want to spend that kind of money for the older version of it, seek out Miss Balmain. It's not exactly the same, but I'd say that it's similar enough that if you don't want to spend the extra money, it's like it's pretty much a knockout. And it's Miss Balmain. And these bottles, if you get like sort of I think this is a 30 mil, I don't think it sets you back very much money right now. And mind you, this is a 90s version. So you could go right back to spending the extra amount of money to get an even more vintage version of Miss Balmain for $200, $300, so on and so forth. So, but I think generally speaking, you could get a quantity of Miss Balmain for less money. And it's also remarkable as well. I recommend stock made up to the end of 2022 for the Youth Do. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's a lot of lesser known fragrances at the time fall into that same realm. And while each of them is, the perfumer's own take on it, or in some instances, the same perfumer doing variations on the theme, um, it's up to you. If this is a type of genre that you just can't get enough of, I mean, I love collecting all of them. I don't even have all of them because it just I couldn't believe just how many different leather chypres have this similar feel to it. And I do have a few more of them here. For example, Sikkim from Lancôme. It's another example. This one is a lot more floral though, and a bit more green, but still quite lovely. And things like Coolidge and Plant, another example. Very sunny disposition, that one, to Azure's more moody and mercurial kind of feel. It's much more of a sunny disposition. It's beautiful stuff. I would recommend the vintage for that one, as the newer versions are a bit watered down. Classical grooming. I'm always wondering if when people talk about leather notes, if they're talking about the leather proper or the smell of the tanning agents. That's a very good comment, because often when we are smelling leather, we're smelling the leather after it's been treated. Because leather on its own, before it's been treated and cured and the added aromatic materials are included, is not a particularly pleasant smell. We're talking about animal hide. So you are making a very good point of bringing to the surface this particular aspect of it, because what we're smelling when we smell leather is the final product. We're not smelling the raw hide of the animal. And there's so many different things that are used in curing and tanning and preparing leather for use, softening it, getting rid of impurities. And a lot of these things that are smoky and aromatic and flowery and spicy, they were used in this process. And Duncan says, JJ, have you tried 555 Black Leather Jesus? It's sexy in a bondage type of way. I can't say that I have, but I'll make a note of that. 555, is that 555 or AM? Leather Jesus. That is a name for the books. Who is 555 the house name? And Algebraeus mentions, okay, it's a cross conversation. So obviously, Philippe has an affinity for your knowledge. That's quite lovely to have the two of you bonding over that. Yep, Angere, Alliage, Spellbound Este are in excellent condition currently under the Lauder lineup. It's good to know. I agree with the Angere, and I hadn't had the fortune of trying the others, so that is good to know. Continuing on, actually, classical grooming, we're going to think of some of talk about some of those earlier leathers that really do evoke, the saddle soapy kind of aromatic and birch tar forward or cade forward kind of leathers. And one that is quite lauded is Santa Maria Novella's Peau d'Espagne. Here. So this would evoke that type of Spanish leather, which is more about the smell of what goes into that process than the actual leather itself. It's sort of the impression of leather without it actually, being all about the leather, but it's very soapy. It's a very saddle soap. That's the thing about the Spanish leather. It's very soapy, floral, but really pronounced. And we also have another one that is quite nice. Spanish leather cologne. And that's from GOF Trumper, which also falls into that same sort of category. But then we also have the Russian leather, the Cuir de Russie. Guerlain had a Cuir de Russie at one time. Many of the houses in the early 20th century had their own version of a Cuir de Russie. And I have two of them here. Of course, we do have Chanel's Cuir de Russie, which I still think in its current EDP form is quite beautiful. And Cuir de Lancôme, which unfortunately is no longer in production. This has been out of production for some time. infamous for having these caps that do not click. And this is a lesser discussed Cuir de Lucy version of Cuir de Lucy that Lancôme originally released in the 1930s, I believe, and then they re-released it in the 2000s, late 2000s. That's Cuir de Lancôme. And I would be remiss without mentioning another one from days of yore, the Cuir de Russie Eau de Toilette from LT Piver, which in Europe is, if I'm not mistaken, is readily available in a TK Maxx, but I still think it smells quite nice. And Duncan mentions 555 is the house, and there's an IG page. I'll splash a bit of alliage from a mini that I scored from the same estate sale to check it out. Alliage is quite a lovely one as well. That would involve probably another theme. I think that would probably be herbal theme, green chypras. What materials would go into green chypras? Perhaps. I agree, Jonathan. And Algebraius, the Hidden Gem at Prada, Desert Serenade, a honeyed IBQ leather with cumin. Very nice. Or cumin. How do you prefer? Do you prefer cumin or cumin? Some others here I wanted to mention. We do know of the classic Aramis, which would bring this style to a men's chypre in the late 60s, sorry. Bernard Chant's Aramis. This is a vintage cologne. Emilio Pucci, Vivara. It's another great one from the late 60s. And then eventually, we move into the decades that follow. So we talked about a few of them from the 70s. We talked about Monsieur Couturier. We talked about Sikkim. But we go further in. I think we're going to start moving into the 80s here. So we have some examples that carry on these themes, adding more fougere elements. Trussard di Uomo. And of course, we do have Bellamy. No, I don't have the shaker bottle because I actually do prefer this version of it. I just feel like it's a little toned down, and it just feels like more beautiful to me. I find the original to be nice, but a little bit too aggressive even for my taste, which can come as a surprise. But this is Jean-Claude Ellena's sort of remastering, I suppose, of Bellamy. But it was originally released in the 80s. Moschino, 1990, which is in the same sort of vicinity. Very Styrax forward, both Bellamy and Moschino. And then once again, more floral, aromatic, chypre, fougere, hybrids like Fendi Uomo. Antaeus, it goes without saying. I don't have Antaeus's bottle right by my side. And yeah, and then we just start getting, we have Gaumont, which, it didn't rewrite, it didn't reinvent the leather, but it's just so satisfying. This is Etro's Gaumont, sort of like this is sort of like the 90s version of Konica 10. Kind of adds some elements that were heretofore unseen or unsmelled in leathers. Etro Gaumont is another nice one to have around and spray once in a while. We must mention Fahrenheit. It's been discussed quite enough. I know, not a vintage, but still smells great. For reference, and I still like to spray it every now and then. And then we get into more recent ones. I already mentioned the Salvador Ferragamo Testa de Moro earlier when I was discussing a Libanol and its usage in leather accords. And here's a couple. We're talking about the softer side of leather, which I can appreciate. Jean-Claude and Ellena's Cuir d'Ange, which is just smells magical to me, and I love the usage of florals in this as well. It has hawthorn in it, which I've discussed before. Hawthorn, which is a type of tree blossom, which smells sort of anisic, powdery, pungent, almost overwhelming if you're under its boughs. But it just creates this wonderful balm in the air when they're in bloom. These scented hawthorn blossoms. It has a high component of anisaldehyde, so it is a bit anisic, but also very floral. So it's Cuir d'Ange and Dame Blanc from Serge Lutens, which is another example of a suede kind of leather with touches of apricot. And it's a very understated and nuanced beauty from Serge Lutens. Is it still being made by Serge Lutens? Is it in one of those ungodly Graziels or something? I'm not up to date on what's going on with those. They move them from Graziels to cloches, the bell jars, and then back and then forth, and then they stop making them, and they start making them again. I can't keep track. It's really just it's chaos at Serge Lutens. I can't make heads or tails of it. I don't get it. But yeah, I really like these bottles. I think they're much more cost efficient for somebody who is on a budget and doesn't want to have to spend the kind of money that is required on one of those tall antenna adorned Graziels for 200 or 275, whatever amount of money. I think it's unfortunate. Yeah, I guess not really surprising at this point. So I think I pretty much shared all of the examples of the leathers in my collection. How about if folks who are tuned in right now, we have 23 people who are currently tuned in. If you perhaps would like to share some leathers that put a pep in your step, that put a tiger in your tank, that make you feel alive. And while we await people mentioning some of their favorites, Algebraist comes correct with some more knowledge. An important green accord stearyl acetate plus galbanum borrowed from Vanvert, but it's not obvious without seeing the GC. Yes, the classic Vanvert from Balmain. Stearyl acetate is that reedy, it's like sort of like a Reseda, sort of like the top notes of gardenia. It is used in a lot of those green chypres and descends from Vanvert into many of them that we would see all the way through the 60s and 70s. We would see that with YSLY. When I'm thinking the 70s, I think like Metal from Paco Rabanne. And Jean-Louis Chauvet. There's so many of them. That's like that could be a whole other live stream of green chypres. Maybe that would be the next topic. Green chypres. Green. We could do notes and accords for green, or maybe we could wait a little bit until the springtime when it is deemed a little bit more appropriate. Aramis, I think Bijan has a similar leather note to that as well. What's in Trussardi Uomo that makes it smell very petrol, oily, plastic-like? It could have something to do with the quinolines with Styrax. I think combining the two of them together could probably create a little bit of oily, petrol-like feeling in the dry down. Portos. I don't own Portos. I have a sample of it. I think that it could be, yeah, that could be a good example as well. I think that deserves a mention. And Paroli at 8:17, so that was a few minutes ago. You asked if it was a new bottle, but I don't know which bottle was one of the last bottles that I had brought up. If you want to just tell me what specific fragrance I was sharing, where you're asking if it was a new bottle. Philippe Alex never smelled Gamma, but from the name, is it rubbery too? It does have sort of like a bit of a rubbery quality to it. Yeah, yeah. It would be worth checking out. I don't know what the newer version is like, but yeah, I almost want to spray it. Hey, that will be the one that I will spray right now on my skin. Goma for Metro, famous for their paisley patterns. Hmm. It is delightful. It's so bright. It's bright and it's almost gilded. And that is a smile-inducing fragrance. So which one is in the bell jar now, Paroli? Is it Dame Blanc? I'm sorry, folks, that I'm just catching up here. Ah, yes, Paroli. I was discussing Testa de Moro earlier. The incense leather, which is a genre that I wish was more common. Now, yeah, I mean, I could feel, yeah, a little bit of rubber. Reminds me of those cube-like rubber erasers that are used by artists with sort of that beige color to them. If people know what I'm talking about, kind of reminds me of that. Philippe asks, "Have I put my nose on uh, Quiom? Quiom? Which Quiom? Is that the? Oh God, what's the name of that house? I know which house it is. I can see the bottles, but I can't remember the name. I have not smelled it yet. In Lone Star Memories, I know that is Andy Dower, right? Lone Star Memories. There, there's so much terrain that I have not scaled because I just need to know where to draw the line. So I mean, I could try those out and get back to you. I should probably order some samples. I'm familiar with both of them. I think actually I did have Quiyum, a sample of it a long time ago, and I don't recall it really resonating with me enough to pursue it any further, but maybe it's worth revisiting. Algebra says, speaking of Paco Rabanne, I'm thinking to get a bottle of the current Calandre, despite owning Lieve Gauche. Hey, why not both? Just like the meme says. And the Carnation in Portos is the star, competing with Beverly Hills Polo Club. And then classical grooming. Would you folks consider a good entry level leather fragrance, leather scent for a younger man? Hmm. I'm notoriously bad at recommending fragrances for younger people unless said younger person already has an adventurous left field taste. I don't know if I'd be the best person to recommend something because the first thing that came to mind was Fahrenheit, and I even think Fahrenheit might be a bit challenging for modern youth. So I don't know. And then something like, a Tom Ford would be too pricey for them unless they take a helicopter to their boarding school. I don't know. I'm sure somebody else can help you out. I don't think I'd be very helpful. Orto Parisi, thank you very much. It's having a mental block. Okay, modern Antaeus. Yeah, I say why not? For the youth, will the youth of today embrace Antaeus, modern or otherwise? Well, that will be the day. I'd love to see that. Yeah, metal is just it's effulgent. It has an effulgence to it. It's like it's the brightest green, like it's like jungle leaves and like big blooming gardenias and big blooming like wildflowers. I don't know how to explain it. It's just nice. I think that will work. I think that's a good adjective for it. Nice. Very nice. Not just merely, oh, that's nice, but like really, really nice. Styx argues that Antaeus is not entry level. And yeah, I find it hard to, unless that particular, like I said, unless that particular young person is inclined to seek fragrance outside of what is de rigueur, you know, that they're just not merely satisfied with what everybody else is wearing. And as we know, youth are really impressionable, and their peers really, their peers' opinions really do matter to them. So I think it could be really tough for a lot of youth to expand their horizons and get outside of that very, mainstream sort of milieu, and decide, oh well, fuck everyone. I'll wear Antaeus, and everybody's gonna like it. And if they dislike it, they can go fuck themselves. I think that young people have a tough time with that. Maybe by the time they're in their 20s, they start to find like their crew, their posse that are more arty and interesting and more willing to explore things that are less mainstream. And then maybe, but I just feel like late teens, early 20s, it's very much, about keeping up with the Joneses. There are exceptions. I do think there are exceptions, and they have, but you have to. This is really a situation. If you have a particular person that you have in mind, you have to tell me if you have a particular person in mind. Is it you actually, or is it somebody else that you have in mind? Are they somebody who is willing to go against the grain of what is popular? And if they have that willingness, that openness, and they're really excited to try things that are classic, that might seem too old-fashioned to their peers, and they don't really care what they think, then by all means. But if they're a little bit more reserved, I'd have to, I'm not the best, to recommend, because I don't have my finger on the pulse of really accessible modern leathers. I really honestly don't. I will freely admit that I can't keep myself up to date with that. And I would defer to somebody else who might be able to give a better suggestion than I would. NV, hi. Welcome to the chat and welcome to the stream. We're going to be on until about 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is about a half hour. And just a reminder, folks, if you are willing to buy me a coffee, your support helps grow this channel. It does actually go towards a fund that helps me upgrade my equipment and I need a little new laptop, I need a new microphone, I need a bunch of new stuff, and it will go towards that. So, and I also do have an offer that is still going on, a promotion, which is a pain in the neck because I should have it starred and I didn't have it starred. I'm going all the way up to it. Got to remember to star these comments. Here we go. Going to star it. And I'm going to share it. This is Buy Me a Coffee promotion, 6 cups, and you will receive a sample pack, 12 cups, 4 full bottle grab bag. That means 4 bottles from my egregious collection of fragrances. It just doesn't need to be this big. I don't want to mention how many. It is not normal. It is not healthy. Who am I? I'm like, it's like I'm speaking to the wrong people when I talk about that because many of you have many fragrances like I do. But for those of you who don't have enough and you want some more and some more good stuff, because I'd like to think, like the stuff I have sticking around, even though like I may not be absolutely falling head over heels for them anymore, they're still great fragrances, and I want to extend them to other people. So I have 4 full bottles that I will provide to you, and it's a grab bag. You can't request what it is. It's a surprise, but nobody's been disappointed yet. It's a 4 full bottle grab bag plus a sample pack. So that is for 12 cups. Each cup is $5, US only, please. Check out the pinned link at buymeacoffee.com. And Stick says, I found Queer by Molinar to be a mess of funk. To be honest, for leather, the best entry-level young fragrance is probably from Tom Ford, Ombre Leather. It is not danky. Yes, once again, if they can afford it, yes, I would agree. I would agree on that. Hermes Galop, the entry level. It's expensive. I have it sitting right here, actually. I have it sitting here in the box. Galop d'Hermes, Costina Gel. And it's in a pouch. I knew it would come up. I was holding on to it. I had it on standby until somebody at some point mentioned it. So I have the bottle in here. And entry level, really? You think so? I think that it would. Yeah, I guess. I guess you're right. I find it to be absolutely beautiful. It would be such a diversion from the Gamma that I have on my right hand if I were to put this on. And I love how it has this, it's like peony and rose and quince. You gotta love like a good steeped stewed quince, right? Yeah, it's one of the more expensive Hermes. Good to know it's still in production. At least I'm assuming so since you recommended it. 1740 Histoire de Parfum for an entry level. It really does. Once again, it really depends on how ambitious that young person is. That to me, that I find that hard to be an entry level. Intermediate, maybe. Aramis Modern Leather. Good call, Jonathan. I do think I used to have that. And I thought to myself, this is a really nice, well done, sensible leather. I think that it would appeal to younger folks. But is it still in production, or has that skyrocketed in price like the Tobacco Reserve? Habit Rouge Privé. Haven't tried the Privé. I can't say I can't really give any feedback on that. Paroli says the new Habit Rouge Privé smells like they took 85% of Habit Rouge EDP and 15% of Gucci Guilty Absolute. Intriguing. And Stick says that a young entry level leather frag is Armani Code. Okay. I am at the 99 mark. Need a good one for the 100th. Oh, congratulations for the 100th. Private message me. We'll talk about that. I want to make sure your 100th is a good one, because when you reach that, that's kind of like, that's a crossroads. Like, are you in it for the long haul, or are you ready to kind of seal it up? But let's chat. Wow. 99 bottles of beer in the wall. What's that guy's channel's name? I think his name is Brandon from Oregon. I remember I bought a real Castorian Sach. I'd like to do that. Not many beavers around San Francisco. I don't know what channel you're referring to, but it piques my interest. This alleged Brandon with his Castorium Sacs. Therapeutic fragrance. Okay, that rings a bell. Oh yeah, Patchouli 24 Le Labo. Yeah, it's more in the base. To me, it's quite lovely. It is. But to me, it is just similar enough. Just it resembles Pot d'Espagne just enough that I felt like it wouldn't be worth my adding that to my collection. That's like something where I was like, I'm happy having a sample of this to refer to and to appreciate and to remind myself of how good it is. But I felt like it was too similar to the overall feel that I get from Pot d'Espagne. And then Duncan says, I don't trust Le Labo. Le Labo is the event horizon. And Duncan says, Patchouli 24 reminds me of Lafroig Scotch, burnt peat moss in wooden smoked barrels. That kind of Pot d'Espagne kind of reminds me of that. Similarly, so a very a peaty Scotch. This is a house that I wanted to explore a little bit, but the reviews and the discussion surrounding the house are very mixed. Some swear by the house. Others say that for what is charged to the customer, the compositions are somewhat lackluster to decent. But ultimately, I'd have to do some sampling before I would make an assessment myself. So, Fuguia, 1833 New York, is otherworldly. I'll take note. And Mona Diorio, yeah, that is another one that is a great mention for leathers. The queer from Mona Diorio, which I actually used to have a decant of that and wore it for a good amount of time back in 2012 or so. It was sort of a go-to. It was a pretty generous decant. That's when I had all these decants of Mona Diorio and Frederick Ball and all that fancy pants sort of stuff. 400 and worth every penny. You don't say. I don't think now I have my whole collection, as I've spent way too much money, but on an individual perfume, I have never spent more than $350. I have not exceeded that. It was just always my cutoff. I would always be like, well, if it's that much, it really is just, I'm not going to really need a full bottle of it. I just have to draw the line. I just don't really feel like it's worth my while to spend that kind of money when I already feel like I'm spending too much money as it is. And you mentioned they're hit or miss, but the ingredients are very high quality. Yeah, that's what I've heard. It's very high quality ingredients, well blended. But some people say that, for all the hullabaloo, and the price, some of the choices, some of the selections are kind of nice, but you could find something similar to it for half the price. Do you also have Oud Cuir d'Arabie? I don't have it waiting next to me. I have it, but it's a good mention. It is. And oh my God, how shockingly horrific, but in the most lovable way that opening is. It's like holy, just woo-wee. Really pungent, really strong, really cheesy. But the gradation, sort of what would you call it? Sort of the development curve is pretty steep. It starts off like a like a sock in the face, and then very quickly it just smooths out. Still nice, but that immediate pow, that immediate like grotesqueness tapers off relatively quickly. But it's so worth it to visit it again and again. I don't know what it is. Sometimes something that can be just so, I don't know. I guess it's like seeing somebody who's just so bizarre looking that you almost think they're unconventionally attractive, and you just can't stop looking at them. Does anybody know what that's like? And then there's Balenciaga Hohan Club. Yeah, I feel like that is sort of a descendant of the Antaeus theme, and we would see a number of those from the time that Antaeus was released, and that brings me to a topic, a whole project that I'd like to do, sort of doing the linkage between fragrances that broke the mold and the many versions that followed. Some that improved on it, others that do a great job, but they're very similar, some that move in a different direction and are exciting, and then still others where it's like they didn't bring anything new to the table, but it was just this particular designer house or perfume house's version of X fragrance. And Teus was one of those where it's like they created a trend. Kuros created a trend. Aramis, to a degree, and Azure created a trend. Um, but to do just a more robust sort of like linkage or like a family tree. I don't know if you really would call it a family tree because they're not all actually related, or I guess you could call it that, where you see all the Me Too's. This style has proven to be successful. Why don't we do our take on it? All those also rans and just sort of do like a map of all of them. What do you think of that idea? Like, I thought that would be kind of a cool idea, and also might prove to be helpful to people who are trying to navigate amongst all these different fragrances. Like, is it really worth it to get this 30th version of a green Chypre from the 60s through the early 80s? Is it really worth it to get this version of like an aromatic leather fougere from the 80s, so on and so forth? Because there's just so many of them, you know. Some of them are unique, some of them not so much, you know. Right, fecal, yep. Poopy, cheesy. Thinking about Tom of Finland from Eldo. Anyone else have thoughts? I have to say that I'm ignorant about that one. I have not smelled that one. I have never sampled it. But yes, Philippe. Yes, like a name magazine family tree, but not as biased. Yeah, sort of. Yeah, where you have like a certain family. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess so. I guess, and have it more comprehensive and really cover as many bases as possible. To do something like that would be kind of a cool project. Because I'm getting to that point where it's like, somebody suggests like, well, have you tried such and such? Like, it's an amazing Chypre. And then like I don't have the heart to tell them like, yeah, it's great. Because I'm not the type of person to want to rain on someone's parade. Like, there's nothing more that I can't stand than somebody's like who rolls their eyes and it's like, oh, I don't know, that one is boring. That one's just kind of like, not, like I don't want to like spoil somebody's happiness, like, and I see that happen on like on message board, not message board. What is this, like 2002? On certain forums, where somebody is talking about a new discovery and how much they love it, and other people chime in like, yeah, I agree, that's great. And you always have that one critic that says, yeah, I didn't really find that exciting. It's kind of, it's kind of a boring fragrance. It's been done over so many times. Like, I don't want to be that person. But I also often think to myself, like, that's not really one that I felt was doing anything different as a Chypre. It's kind of like a by the number Chypre, you know, follow the sheeper template to the very, the very last drop of labdanum, uh, the very last um, scoop of Everno. Um, there's a lot out there though. And I think that you kind of pare it down a little bit, like what would be considered quote unquote essential? Because really, I mean, like that's so subjective in itself. Like, what is really considered essential when you're a perfume collector? But if we're going to use that loosely, what is essential? What are the what were the benchmarks, so to speak? You know, and what were the ones that kind of like were a little too derivative and reductive? You know, I just think that would be a good idea. Hey, news. Thanks for stopping by. We have about a little less than 15 minutes here, and then I have to wrap up. Um, oh, hi. Shalimar has been discussed. Yeah, we haven't discussed it, but that's another good mention. We pretty much veered into turning it to the audience and asking what their suggestions were. I went through all the raw materials, natural and synthetic. We went through all the examples that I had set aside because I didn't want to set aside too many because I would just spend another hour and a half after the stream putting everything back. But Shalimar is another great suggestion. I mean, being that it is considered quote unquote an oriental or an amber, that does have a prominent leather element in it as well. L'essence de I'm trying to say Italian and French. Charuti is super affordable, like 15 US dollars for a 30 ml leather mixed with sweet saffron makes it more easy on the nose than leather. So I think it's a good entry level option. Perfect leather option if we're considering that younger people have a budget and everything is expensive right now. So that's a really great suggestion. Enchanté, enchanté. For those of you who don't know who Enchanté is, Enchanté. Check out the link that is in the description of the live stream, and we have the link for Enchanté. If you were looking to shop, it is the holidays. You can buy a few gifts for yourself at Enchanté Perfumes. Hi, Manginosis. Good evening to you. Yes, glad to have you here for the home stretch of the stream. Hmm. Yes, Goma is a happy leather. Etrogomo. Hmm. So I have not actually decided what the next notes and accord stream will be. So for those who are currently tuned in, we have 23 people tuned in. If anybody wants to give a suggestion, we'll see what kind of suggestions are out there for the next one. Now, bear in mind, it has to be something that is pretty much a hallmark in perfumery. So if you suggest something like, I don't know, tarragon, I'm not gonna really be able to flesh that out into a stream. It would have to be something that's like a very prominent classic accord in perfumery. And what we'll do is much like this notes and accord stream, I will set aside all of the natural and synthetic materials, discuss those, and then we'll go over some prime examples. Amber, 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 amber. Nice. Amber. That's a great suggestion. Oak moss. Very nice. Okay. Amber, rose, and oud. So with that, I think maybe oud or rose, but I have to warn you, supply and demand. I'm not the biggest fan of oud. I'm very particular about oud. I'm not going to have too many. I have really a modest selection of fragrances that feature oud. I do have a lot of oud materials because of my studying and exploration in perfume making. But as far as like examples, I'm not going to really be all that helpful with that. Rose, on the other hand, part one and part two, baby. Like I love rose. Like I would have a tough time tightening it and keeping it to 2 hours. But I'm loving the idea of amber. Amber is a good one because you can discuss the whole how an amber accord is created, what goes into an amber accord, what is the difference between an an amber accord versus ambergris. Um, there's a lot to discuss in that. Rose alone, yeah. Iris, very nice. Yeah, iris would be really great. Yeah. Look at this great list. Amber, iris, civet, ambergris. Mm. Thanks, Anuj. Yeah, yeah, you should definitely check out the first hour too, because I just go over all these different raw materials like the saffroline here, the sueterol, the cade wood, the birch tar, the quinolines, and everything. And then we move on to just chatting about the perfumes that have these particular materials in them in their leather accords. Animalix, or we're referring to Animalis cinerum. Animalis cinerum would come into play when we're talking about animalics. That would be a cool one too. Just do animalics. So we could, I think that actually would be more achievable than fleshing out a whole 2 hour stream just for Civet or just for Castorian. Castorian was already given a mention here, but animalics, that could be like a whole stream as well. Cumin, yeah, cumin. I love my cumin fragrances. Yeah, that would be awesome. And even if it isn't a notes and accords stream, I could do a video on a particular note as well. Honey, yeah, very nice. Sandalwood. I was thinking about sandalwood as well. Yeah. Narcissus. I actually do have a Narcissus video. So, but I didn't really discuss the Narcissus materials. So, what I could do, depending upon how much can be fleshed out for a particular stream, I could do like a series of maybe two or three different types of florals, or we can sort it out, and Narcissus can be part of that particular stream. So, it really all depends on, how much can be discussed within the realm of a 2 hour stream. I like to keep these streams nice and tight, no more than 2 hours, because I'd run out of steam. I mean, doesn't everybody run out of steam after 2 hours? What the hell else can I say after 2 hours? Honey reminds me of JJ. So honey reminds you of me? Is it because I'm a fan of honey and fragrance, or do you think I'm honey sweet? Crippler, what's up? Good to see you. Haven't seen you in some time. And great to see you, Joe. The BBLD is dropped in. Labdanum. So labdanum would be, see, the thing about labdanum to me is it's a good suggestion. We'll definitely talk about labdanum. I feel like it will come up time and again though, because labdanum is more like it serves a purpose for an accord rather than being an accord. If that makes sense. You know what I mean? Of course, there are fragrances like Labos, Lab, so on and so forth. Fragrances that center around that. But I feel like labdanum will have will be a star player if we do an amber stream, because labdanum is a huge part of amber. Um, but yeah, I mean, I could talk at great length about labdanum as well. I'm a big fan. Osmanthus. I'm seeing Osmanthus somewhere. It came up here and I wanted to highlight it. Yep, Fernando Osmanthus, very nice. That could be part of maybe a stream where we do like three different florals, and one of them could be Osmanthus. So we have plenty of time in the future to work on these. I'm surprised. I don't know if somebody had already uh, sticks. I'm not sharing that one. I'm surprised nobody had mentioned tobacco, or if somebody did, I just missed it. But tobacco, definitely, that would be a whole stream could be dedicated to tobacco for sure. Aldehydes, yeah, aldehydes would be a good one to discuss. Yeah, those are powerful. Oh God, I've mentioned this before, but when I was first learning the ropes on putting together perfumes, I bought very large quantities of aliphatic aldehydes, and I didn't realize that they needed to be diluted to such a small amount. And then I'm buying like half ounces of them, and they just went to waste because I was just learning how to make perfumes. And that was like enough aliphatic aldehydes to make like huge batches of perfumes, like not for experimentation. So live and learn. If you start um, teaching yourself how to create perfume, start off with very small quantities of aliphatic aldehydes because a tiny amount goes a long way. And Tripler says carnation on my mind and a big fan. Vitriol Douillet. This evening, a lovely one from Serge Lutens. I love carnation. Carnation would be great to do a whole video on, or maybe do that as part of like a stream of different florals. And maybe what I can do is I could combine florals that seem to work well together. So if I do 3 in a stream, it would be 3 flowers that kind of work kind of very similarly. Like I could choose, rose with peony, and what's another one that goes very well with rose? You could do something like that, Rhubarb. I don't know if I could do a whole stream on rhubarb, but rhubarb is interesting. And it is a relatively new kind of note. I think more recent scent technology enabled us to create a rhubarb note. Yeah, it's a great one, Vitriol. I love the carnations. I love that one. I love Lorenzo Villaresi's Garofano. Garofano is Italian for carnation. Also, Santa Maria Novella is Garofano. Belogia from Caron, great carnations. Geranium, yes, Philippe, thank you. You're helping me out here. Geranium would be great because geranium has an adjacency as well. Brilliant. I could do a whole stream on rose, geranium, and peony. They're not all the same, but they're all kind of in the same kind of vicinity in some ways because they all have some components that are similar in their scent profile. Musk, yep, awesome, awesome. So those are some great ideas, but you know what? I think that the second one, because we're in a season for it, is going to be amber. So that's going to be the topic that I will choose for the December Notes and Accord stream. It will be amber, and we will have further ones each week. What am I talking about? Each month. I don't have the end. I honestly, I can barely do one thing for my YouTube channel per week, let alone try to do this per week and everything else. I wish I did. I just have a really demanding job. But I'm just happy to be able to check in with you folks and do a stream or do a video once a week. Next week, we have Effluvium coming back. We have Chester Gibbs. He is going to be our guest. Stay tuned for more details on that, but I believe it's going to be next Tuesday. I don't have the time with me right now, but I think it's going to be sometime late in the afternoon. The following week, I think I'll release another video, and then we'll do another effluvium after that. And then the week after that, we'll do the second in the series of Notes and Accords. Amber, amber, amber. Yep. We'll do amber next time. And then all of your suggestions were really great. I'll start planning those out in the next few months and keep you guys posted. Supply and Demand says Encelade Marc-Antoine Perrois is a new masterpiece with rhubarb to me. Oh, nice. Yeah, I was a little, I don't think I was brutal on it, but I think I was kind of like, woof, a little too much for me. Not really, it didn't really resonate with me, but you know, I do now recall that on my review I was merciful. I did understand, I did respect its innovation. It's really a forward-thinking kind of fragrance, and I like to give credit where it's due for that, even if it's not something that personally resonates with me. I think to be a good critical analyst and reviewer of fragrance is being able to identify that, even if it doesn't speak to the reviewer. Leather, amber, and then tobacco. Piroli already has it all lined up for me. We'll do amber in December, tobacco in January. Hey, I think that's a good idea. Myrrh, love my myrrh. We could do a resins. We could do resins. But think about notes. So think about this, though. With Notes and Accords, the focus is on the materials. So it all depends on how many materials you would discuss. So something like myrrh is like really more of a note than it is an accord, because there's very little that you need to build upon myrrh. Myrrh as a material itself, I mean, that's it. That's, I mean, there's some other things that can extend it and flesh it out. But hey, that could be a stream where I talk about resins and I decide to talk about myrrh and frankincense and maybe even things like Tolu balsam and Peru balsam and all those different resins and balsams. So why not? Hyssop. Hyssop is not it doesn't show up quite as often as a note, but it'd be lovely to see it more frequently because it's a camphorous, sweet, herbaceous, very very much like an herb garden quality, a little minty, but not toothpastey minty. Hyssop is a very cool smell, the herb itself. Maybe in an incense one. Very smart idea, Philippe. We could do an incense one where myrrh shows up and frankincense, etc. It was brutal. Did you? What did I say? I write a lot of reviews. I just remember I was like, I don't know if I can handle this. This is not for me. This is not meant for me. Just not my bag, not my cup of tea. All right, folks. I think I'm going to wrap it up a little in just a minute or two. We'll let this music play out. It's been about 2 hours. So what we'll do is we will have a notes and accords for Amber in December, per Paroli. And per Paroli will do a tobacco notes and accords in January. How does that sound? Do people approve, disapprove? Immortelle, love Immortelle, great note. That could go with a sort of like a whole category into itself. Like we could add other things to that. And mind you, I'm doing this once a month. You might have to wait until 2026 for me to get to some of these. But I hope you still love me. I'm sorry. I think I would have been far more brutal about certain things than with that. I think at least for that one, I was able to identify its place. Like I was respectful. I was like, okay, I get how this is appealing. It doesn't appeal to me, but I respect its existence. However, there are some perfumes where I have a very difficult time respecting their existence because they're just so horrifically bad. And I have reviews like that too. I try not to write them too often because I want to try to be balanced and nice. Well, there are just some things that just really, yeah, especially with certain perfumers who their head is, way up here and they're full of themselves and they think that they do these, they think that they're these innovators and somebody has to take them down a few notches. Like, no, this needs some work. Sometimes I feel the need to do that, but I like to balance it out with positive reviews, neutral reviews, and stuff like that, where it's like, I'm not feeling this for me personally, but I can see where, this would appeal to a certain audience and I respect and I can identify that it was well done, even though it's not doing well for me. Thank you very much, Supply and Demand. It's much appreciated. And thank you for your time spent with the stream. This has been a great time. I'm glad that I could resolve my technical issues. I think this was a very lively discussion, and I'm excited to do Amber next month. I'll get started in preparing for that. And just a reminder to folks, just once again, we do have much in supply for this. Buy me a coffee. 6 cups equals a sample pack. For a whole bunch of samples in there. Good samples. I'm not going to throw you a bunch of Mancera, red tobacco, because there's too many of them sitting around. There would be good samples, nicely curated. 12 cups gets you a 4 full bottle grab bag. That means you get 4 full bottles of fragrances from my collection that I must part with because I only have so much room. I don't have much storage, and I'm not going to get around to all this stuff. So 4 full bottle grab bag, sample pack, included in that. US only, please check out the website. And that's going to be it for me tonight. I hope all of you have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you might be in the world. Thank you, Philippe. Thank you, Paroli. And thank you so much, Supply and Demand. That I am humbled by that. I'm glad that I could enlighten folks, and I've been enlightened as well. It's been a great time. All right, everyone. Take care. Be well.